She said, "I'm fine," but her eyes told me everything. It was almost midnight when I first saw her. The street lamps buzzed quietly above the gas station, casting long shadows across the nearly empty parking lot. I wasn't supposed to be there. I had no reason to be out driving, no destination, no goal, no plan. Just a restlessness that tugged at me made me grab my keys and get behind the wheel like I was trying to outrun something invisible. I pulled into Pump 3 more out of habit than need left the engine running and stepped outside. The air was cold sharp in that way that wakes you up a little too much. I stretched, yawned, and wandered inside to grab a drink. I didn't need anything, but somehow a warm sandwich and a bottle of iced tea ended up in my hands anyway. Routine things, nothing important. Until I stepped back out and saw her. Her SUV was parked a few spots away, sleek, dark, new. She sat motionless in the driver's seat, head bowed slightly like she was reading a message on her phone. But then I saw at her shoulders trembling, her hands clenched tight on the wheel. Her profile, lit faintly by the overhead lamp, was streaked with mascara. She wasn't just crying, she was breaking. And I froze. We've all been told not to get involved. Mind your business, they say. People don't want help, they want privacy. But something about her silence was louder than any scream. Something about the way she sat completely alone in her devastation made it impossible for me to look away. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her story. But I knew that kind of pain. I'd felt it too, alone late at night, trying not to fall apart in a place no one would notice. Only someone noticed this time. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have the right words. I just had a gut feeling and a chocolate bar I wasn't planning to eat. So I walked over, not to save her, not to fix anything, but because someone once showed up for me when I said I was fine and wasn't. And that night I realized how powerful a quiet moment between two strangers could really be. I stood by her car, heart racing, unsure if I was making a mistake. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did and just didn't care. Her face was turned toward the window, but I could see the red around her eyes. It was the kind of crying that left you emptied out, the kind you don't do unless something inside you has cracked wide open. I hesitated with my hand halfway raised, then tapped gently on the glass. She turned toward me, startled but not frightened, just tired. Her mascara was smudged and her cheeks were damp. I gave a small wave, palms up, trying to look non-threatening. "Hey," I said, my voice low. "Sorry to bother you. I just saw you were upset. Wanted to make sure you were okay." She stared at me for a moment, then rolled the window down a few inches. Her voice came out soft, brittle. "I'm fine." That was all she said. 2 words. The ones we're all trained to use when we don't want to talk. But her face said otherwise. I nodded slowly, not pushing. "Okay, I just wanted to check. I'll leave you alone." She didn't say anything else, just stared straight ahead again. I turned back toward my car, half expecting that to be the end of it. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I walked back inside the gas station, grabbed a chocolate bar and a tiny plush bear from the impulse buy rack by the register. It was silly, impulsive, but something in me said she didn't need words. She needed proof that someone saw her. I came back out and gently opened the passenger door. She looked at me more annoyed than alarmed. "You again," she said. "I told you I'm fine. I know I said, but I've been there. I know what fine looks like when it's actually falling apart." I handed her the chocolate and the toy and didn't try to sit close. I just stayed. That's when the dam broke. Not all at once, but enough for a few pieces to float to the surface. She told me her name was Delaney, that her fiancé had cheated on her with her best friend, that her parents blamed her for being too dependent, that she'd been having panic attacks and didn't trust herself to drive anymore. "I didn't even mean to stop here," she said. "I just couldn't keep going." I nodded, listening, not trying to fix, just staying. "You want to get out of here?" I asked quietly. "There's a lake not far. Quiet. Peaceful. We don't have to talk. Just breathe." She hesitated, then whispered, "Okay." We left her car at the station and drove in my beat-up Civic. The heater clanked, the windows fogged, and neither of us said much at first, but the silence wasn't awkward. It felt safe. By the time we reached the lake, the stars were blazing in the sky like tiny promises. I grabbed the firewood and she followed me down the narrow path. We built a small fire and sat in its glow, saying nothing at first. Eventually she spoke. "You really don't know me. Why are you doing this?" I tossed a stick into the flames. "Because I saw myself in you." She went quiet again. Then she told me about the betrayal the moment she walked in on her fiancé and her best friend, the months of lying, the gaslighting, the breakdown that followed. She said her parents told her it was her fault for being too trusting. Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop talking. And I didn't interrupt. She told me she hadn't slept in days, that she couldn't eat, that she felt like she was floating above her life, watching it burn from a distance. And now she didn't know how to come back to herself. "I feel broken," she said. "You're not broken," I told her. "You're healing." There's a difference. For the first time, she smiled, a small, tired smile, but real. We roasted marshmallows, burned a few, laughed about it, shared stories. I told her about the time I locked my keys in my car during a job interview. She told me she once dropped her phone in a pool while trying to take a selfie with her cat. It wasn't about fixing anything, it was just about being together. As the fire died, we sat shoulder to shoulder, our bodies warm from the flames and from something else, something quieter, deeper. On the drive back, she was different, still quiet, still raw, but not alone. I pulled up beside her SUV and she turned to me. "Thank you," she said, "for not walking away." I nodded. "You're welcome." She kissed me lightly on the cheek and started to get out. "Can I give you my number?" I asked, "just to check in. No pressure." She nodded and typed it into my phone. Then she drove off into the night. I sat there for a few minutes before starting my own car. I didn't know if I'd ever hear from her again, but something had shifted. For her, for me. And I knew I wouldn't forget her. 2 months passed. I didn't text. I wanted to, but something told me she needed time and I didn't want to intrude. Until one night I just called. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello." "Hey, it's Rowan, from the gas station." She was quiet, then smiled into the phone. I could hear it in her voice. "I thought you forgot about me." "Not a chance." We talked for hours. She told me she started therapy, that she'd cut off contact with her ex, that she still had bad days but not every day, that she got a part-time job at a bookstore, that she was sleeping again. I told her I was proud of her. She didn't say anything at first, then asked if I wanted to meet. We picked a little cafe with string lights and acoustic music. When she walked in, she looked lighter. Still her, but whole in a new way. "Hey, stranger," she said. "Hey, you." We talked about the lake, the fire, the sandwich, the silence. We talked about work and books and stupid things we regretted saying to people who didn't deserve us. And then she said, "You didn't have to come back." "I know," I said, "but I wanted to." The following weeks unfolded like a slow unraveling of knots, not just for Delaney, but for me too. Every time we met, whether it was a casual coffee or a long evening walk, there was this unspoken understanding between us. We were both healing from different things, both learning to exist again without apology. One night, as we sat in her apartment watching an old black-and-white film on mute, neither of us paying much attention, I looked over and noticed her toes curled up tightly beneath her. She hugged her knees tense despite the calm on her face. "What are you thinking?" I asked gently. She glanced at me and after a long pause said, "I keep waiting for you to disappear." I blinked. "Why would I?" "Because that's what people do," she said simply. "They come in, act like they care, and then they decide I'm too much." There it was, the fear, raw and bare. It wasn't just about her ex-fiancé. It was older than that. A whole life of people teaching her she was hard to love. I leaned closer. "I'm not going anywhere." "You say that now," she said, trying to smile but not quite making it. I didn't argue. Instead, I just reached over and gently took her hand, letting the silence hold everything else. She started to open up more after that, sometimes in words, sometimes just in presence. She invited me to help her rearrange her apartment one weekend. "I want it to feel like mine," she said. Not a graveyard. We spent the day lifting, sorting, sweeping out corners she hadn't touched in months. At one point, we found a box filled with pictures of her and her ex. She looked at it for a long time before finally saying, "I don't hate him. I just hate what he did to me." Then she handed me the box and asked me to put it in storage. Not the trash. Just not in here. It wasn't anger that moved her, it was clarity, and that was more powerful. Another time we were walking near the lake again and she suddenly stopped pulling her coat tighter. "I used to come here to cry," she said. "Now it feels different." I nodded. Maybe now it's not a place of endings. Maybe it's a place of beginnings. She didn't say anything, but she reached over and slipped her fingers between mine. And we walked like that for a long while without a single word more. By the time spring came around, everything had shifted again. One afternoon, I showed up at her place with 2 plane tickets. "What's this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "A weekend trip," I said. "Someplace quiet. New. No history. Just us." She looked skeptical. "No pressure," I added quickly. "We don't have to go anywhere. I just thought it might be nice to write a new story. Together." She stared at the tickets for a long time. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I've never been on a plane." "Then it's time," I said, grinning. We went to Oregon, a sleepy coastal town with more lighthouses than stoplights. We stayed at a tiny inn where the sheets smelled like salt water and the ocean was always within earshot. We didn't fill the days with tours or activities. We wandered, ate seafood on the docks, read books in silence, watched storms roll in like symphonies in slow motion. One morning she leaned on the balcony, looking out at the fog, and whispered, "I feel free here." Why, I asked. "Because I don't owe anyone anything in this place. I can just be." We stayed an extra day. The night before we flew home, we sat on the sand with a small driftwood fire between us. I glanced at her bathed in moonlight and realized I had fallen in love with her not all at once, but in pieces over every quiet conversation and shared silence. "I think I'm in love with you," I said, voice low. She turned surprised. "You sure?" I nodded. "I've never been more sure." She didn't respond right away. She looked back at the water. Then she said, "I don't know if I'm ready to say it back, but I feel it, like a current under the surface." "That's enough," I said. Back home, things didn't turn perfect overnight. There were still days when she would retreat into herself, when memories came like ghosts, when she pushed me away just to see if I'd come back, and I always did. One night after a long day, I came over to find her curled up on the floor of her bedroom. No words, no explanation, just her shaking, slightly breathing shallow. I didn't speak. I lay down next to her. Minutes passed, then an hour. She finally whispered, "I'm scared." "Me too," I replied, "but we're not alone anymore." She clung to that, and slowly she stood. That's how it went for months. A dance of falling and rising, of teaching each other what trust looked like, not as a promise, but as a daily choice. One evening, she invited me to dinner with her parents, the same ones who had once told her she was the problem. "They want to meet you," she said. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm not afraid anymore." The dinner was awkward at first. Her father was stiff. Her mother kept trying to make jokes that didn't land. But then Delaney said something that silenced the room. Rowan helped me when I didn't know how to help myself, and her voice didn't shake once. After dessert, her mom hugged me. Her father patted my shoulder. "I underestimated her," he said quietly. "She's stronger than anyone knows," I replied. On the walk back to the car, Delaney said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For holding space for me when I couldn't hold it for myself." I looked at her, this woman who had once been a stranger crying in a car, and realized how far she'd come. Not because I saved her, but because she chose to stand again. "I didn't do it for thanks," I said. "I did it because I saw you." She smiled. "I'm finally starting to see me, too." The seasons shifted again, and with them, so did we. There was no single moment where everything clicked, no movie-like montage of triumph. It was quieter than that, subtler, like the steady turning of a page, one line at a time. Delaney started painting again. Not for anyone else, just for herself. It began with small canvases, abstract splashes of color that made no sense to anyone but her. One evening I found her in her sunlit living room, brush in hand, streaking shades of gold across a rough canvas with a look I hadn't seen before: peace. "I forgot what this felt like," she said, voice barely above a whisper. What I asked, leaning against the doorframe, creating something that didn't come from pain. And just like that, a dam broke. Not a dramatic flood, but a slow, gentle current. She started waking up earlier, humming in the kitchen. Her laugh came easier, freer. Sometimes she still froze at odd moments, like her body remembered the trauma, even if her mind was learning to let it go, but she always came back. I was there for the good days and the hard ones, not as her savior, just as someone who saw her clearly, who stayed. Then came the day she got the letter. I was fixing a loose hinge on her kitchen cabinet when I heard the envelope hit the floor. She stared at it like it was a snake. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't speak, just held it up. A return address from her ex-fiancé. No name, just his initials. Delaney sat down at the table. Her fingers shook as she tore it open. I sat across from her, silent, a steady presence. The letter wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind either. It was hollow. An apology laced with excuses. Words like, "I didn't know how to handle it," and "I wish things were different." When she finished reading, she folded it once, then again, then slid it into the drawer next to her old silverware. "I thought it would feel like closure," she said, "but it feels like nothing." "Maybe that is closure," I offered gently. She looked at me, eyes wide. Then she nodded. "Maybe it is." She never took the letter out again. A few weeks later, she got a call from a local gallery. They had seen some of her recent work on Instagram and wanted to feature 3 pieces in an upcoming exhibit. "I'm not ready for that," she told me, pacing the living room. "That's real. That's people judging me." "No," I said. "That's people seeing you. And you're not the same woman they'd have seen a year ago." She swallowed hard, then smiled. "Okay, but only if you're there. I wouldn't miss it for the world." The night of the exhibit, she wore a dark green dress that matched the specks of emerald in her eyes. Her hands trembled as we walked into the gallery, but when people stopped in front of her paintings, pointing and whispering, not with criticism, but awe, something in her changed. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted. When someone asked her what inspired the work, she said simply, "Starting over." And it landed. You could see it ripple across the room. After the event, we walked to a quiet corner cafe. We shared a bottle of wine, splitting a slice of chocolate cake, and for the first time in a long time, Delaney looked unburdened. "I feel like I can breathe again," she said, exhaling slowly, "like I'm not just surviving anymore." "You're not," I said. "Neither are you," she added, eyes locking onto mine. And she was right. Being with Delaney had peeled things back in me too. Old fears, deep doubts. I'd grown used to staying on the sidelines of my own life, afraid of breaking things I touched. But loving her required presence, courage. It demanded that I show up not just for her, but for myself. That summer we took a road trip. No destination. Just her Jeep, 2 backpacks, and a promise to follow whatever road felt right. We slept in cheap motels and under the stars. We swam in cold rivers. We danced barefoot in the headlights after getting caught in a rainstorm somewhere outside Nashville. We fought once badly after getting lost and snapping at each other out of exhaustion. She accused me of trying to control everything. I told her she shuts down when she feels vulnerable. We didn't speak for 6 hours after that. But that night, lying on opposite sides of a motel bed, she reached over and grabbed my hand. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm sorry too." We didn't need more words than that. That trip became the first chapter of what we would later call our real life. When we came back, we moved in together, not as a declaration of forever, but as a decision to keep growing side by side. Delaney kept painting. Her second exhibit came 6 months later, bigger, bolder. She named it Reconstruction. Her favorite piece was one I hadn't seen before, a canvas of overlapping broken shapes in muted tones, with a single brilliant streak of gold cutting through the center. "It's about us," she said, "about the beauty of surviving and choosing to love anyway." The gallery owner offered her a residency in New York. A full year. Paid. "I don't want to lose this," she said one night, curling up beside me. "You won't," I promised. "Would you come?" It wasn't even a question for me. Wherever you are, that's home. So we packed up again, this time together. New York was chaos and wonder. Tiny apartments, loud neighbors, a pace that left us breathless. But we found a rhythm. Mornings in a cramped kitchen making coffee. Afternoons where I wrote while she painted. Evenings exploring the city, learning each other's favorite corners of it. One rainy night, standing under a flickering streetlight in Brooklyn, she looked up at me and said, "I love you." I've known for a long time. I was just scared to say it. My heart nearly stopped. "I love you too," I said, "since the moment you told me your name." Delaney laughed, tears mixing with rain. "That's cheesy." "Yeah," I admitted, "but it's true." And from that point on, we stopped holding back. The years ahead weren't perfect. There were doubts, career frustrations, a health scare, moments where grief resurfaced like an old wound. But through it all, we stayed. One night, years later, I found her back in Indiana, returning for a gallery show that had reached national attention. She stood in front of her newest piece, a depiction of a woman standing in a storm, her face lifted defiant, soaked to the bone but unshaken. Someone asked her, "Is that self-portrait?" She smiled and said, "It's every woman who ever broke and rebuilt herself." And when I took her hand, I realized just how far we'd come, from a stranger crying in a parked car, to this, to strength, to love, to home. There's a quiet kind of strength that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not the kind that shows up in headlines or shouts its name from rooftops. It's the kind that wakes up every day and chooses to keep going, to rebuild, to love again even when it hurts, even when you're scared. That was Delaney. That was me too. We didn't plan for each other. Our story wasn't built on fairy tale timing or picture-perfect beginnings. It started in grief, in silence, in broken places we weren't sure could hold anything new. And maybe that's why it mattered so much. Because it was real. Because it wasn't easy. And because we chose it. Every day. There were no fireworks when Delaney slid her wedding ring into that pocket. No orchestral swell when she asked me to stay that first night. But there was truth. Raw, trembling truth. And somehow that was even more powerful. It's funny how life sneaks up on you. One minute you're just fixing a broken hose in someone's yard. The next you're standing beside them at a gallery show, watching them reclaim every shattered piece of themselves. Not because you saved them, but because you simply stayed long enough for them to save themselves. And if there's one thing I hope anyone takes from this, it's that love doesn't always come wrapped in certainty or tied up in grand declarations. Sometimes it's just a hand held through the storm, a quiet room shared in the dark, a choice to stay when walking away would have been easier. So if you've ever felt like you were too broken to be loved again, or like your story ended when someone else walked away, I promise you it didn't. You're still here. You're still building. And someone out there, they're going to see your cracks and still call you beautiful. Not in spite of them, but because of them. Thanks for sticking through this story with us. If it moved you even a little, please hit that like button. It helps us keep telling stories that matter. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had a moment like this? A time when everything seemed lost, and then someone or something showed you that it wasn't? Let's talk about it. Let's build a space where healing is celebrated and love is earned, not expected. This is where every heartache has a heartbeat behind it, and every ending might just be the beginning of something beautiful. We'll see you in the next one. And until then, stay human, stay hopeful, and don't be afraid to stay.